What would you do if, at 32, you discovered your entire life was built on a lie? As the town car slid to a halt in front of that modest house in a quiet New Jersey suburb, I smoothed the lapels of my Tom Ford suit and double-checked the foreclosure documents. My heart was pounding, not from the pressure of representing the bank in another seizure, but because the address on the folder was an exact match to the one engraved on my only childhood possession, a faded hospital bracelet bearing my name. Man, that day was something else. I'm sitting in the back of a black car, slicing through the suburbs of New Jersey like I own the world, just scanning the paperwork to seize another house from some poor soul who fell behind on their mortgage. I adjusted my ridiculously expensive suit, the kind that costs more than 3 months of an average person's rent, and glanced at the address one last time. Me, Isabel Diaz, the most feared asset recovery specialist at the bank, heading out to do the dirty work no one else wanted, tossing people out of their homes and then sleeping like a baby afterward. At least, that's what I thought I'd be able to do that day. "Kevin, have the documents ready to go," I ordered my assistant, who followed me around like a well-trained puppy. "I want this wrapped up before lunch. I've got a meeting with the board at 2. The poor guy probably thought I didn't notice the way he looked at me with that hint of judgment in his eyes. But who cared? In the cutthroat world of finance, feelings are a liability, a weakness for those who end up on the losing side of my eviction notices. On Wall Street, they say I have a heart of stone. And what of it? To survive in that viper's nest they call the financial market, it's every man for himself, and the devil take the hindmost. For some insane reason, or maybe just because fate has a twisted sense of humor, I'd brought the only relic from my childhood with me that morning, a faded hospital bracelet I found among my things from the foster home, a worthless little trinket that completely contradicted the person I am today. It had my name and an address etched into it, a place I'd never once visited. Why did I bring it? I honestly couldn't tell you. Maybe it was a gut feeling, you know? Like something was pushing me toward the edge of a cliff that would change my life forever. Have you ever felt like you were holding the key to a secret you didn't even know existed? Every time I had to foreclose on a property, my mind drifted back to St. Jude's Home for Children. A pretty ironic name, considering there was very little hope to be found there. I grew up within those peeling walls on the outskirts of Newark, where the sun never seemed to warm anyone's heart. Mrs. Gable, the director, would lead us in prayer every morning before serving our cold oatmeal. "Your parents died in a car crash, Isabel. You should thank God you have a roof over your head," she'd repeat as I swallowed the lumpy porridge along with my tears, fully believing her lie. It was in that warehouse of forgotten children that I learned my first and most important lesson. Trust no one. Study, work, conquer became my mantra at the age of 8, right after I figured out that nobody was coming to rescue me from that pit. And that's exactly what I did. Top of my class in everything, a full scholarship to Wharton, juggling 3 jobs at once to support myself, running on 4 hours of sleep a night for years. I built my empire of degrees and bonuses while I watched the other kids from the home give up on their dreams one by one, settling for whatever scraps the world threw their way. "Don't you ever come back," I once heard a mother scream at her daughter on the steps of the home. That image was seared into my brain, not out of pity for the girl, but because of the chilling fear that my own parents might have done the same to me before this supposed accident. Was Mrs. Gable hiding something far worse? I buried those questions deep down, covering them with a thick layer of indifference. It was just easier to believe they were good people who had died tragically than to imagine they simply didn't want me. And now, look at the irony. I had become the person who knocks on doors to say, "Get out. This house is no longer yours." I saw the parallel, but I chose to ignore it, the same way you pretend not to see a homeless person on the sidewalk in a fancy neighborhood. The bank recruited me straight out of college. They saw in me what others feared. Zero compassion. You don't even flinch when you're calculating how much interest a family will have to pay on their debt, the HR guy said during my interview, as if it were the highest compliment. And in that world, it was. To me, numbers were just numbers. While my colleagues felt a pang of sympathy for the desperation they witnessed, I just pushed forward, hungry for results, desperate for validation. In 5 years, I went from an intern to the head of the entire foreclosure division. A record, they whispered in the hallways. The Ice Queen of Wall Street, they'd call me behind my back. I heard them, and deep down I kind of liked it. My penthouse in Tribeca, which I bought with cash at 32, was like a trophy proving I had conquered my own abandonment. A massive, empty apartment, decorated by a famous designer who charged a fortune to create a contemporary minimalist vibe. A fancy way of saying it had no soul, no warmth. White walls, expensive Italian furniture, and abstract art I bought at auctions, not because I liked it, but because someone told me it was a good investment. Everything was calculated, just like the interest rates I charged the defaulters. I slept on $1,000 sheets, but sleep itself rarely came easy. It's the price of success, I'd lie to myself, popping another sleeping pill. Isabel, you crushed this month's target by 47%, announced Mr. Hayes, my boss and mentor, at our last meeting. He flashed a smile with those perfect teeth that cost as much as a new car. We should celebrate tonight, don't you think? There was always a double meaning in his invitations. One I deliberately ignored. It wasn't that I lacked the ambition to use every tool at my disposal to climb the corporate ladder, but there was something about him that repulsed me. Maybe it was his eyes, always assessing what every person and everything was worth. Unfortunately, I have other plans, I replied, thinking of the expensive wine I'd drink alone in my apartment, looking out over the city I had conquered at the expense of tears, other people's and secretly my own. Have you ever stopped to wonder if success is truly worth the loneliness that so often comes with it? The foreclosure strategy meetings were held every Monday at 8 a.m. on the 30th floor of that gleaming skyscraper on Wall Street. That particular Monday, as the other executives gathered around the oval table with their imported coffees, I had already memorized every single case file. Lot 47 has the potential to recover $12 million in assets, I stated, looking at the spreadsheet I knew by heart. It's comprised of 23 properties, 18 of which are still occupied by families. I spoke of human beings as if they were pieces of furniture that needed to be cleared out. That's what the bank paid me for. And what about the social angle? Asked a junior analyst, some new girl from the corporate social responsibility department. The poor, naive soul hadn't yet learned the unwritten rules of our game. An uncomfortable hush fell over the room, followed by a few stifled laughs. The social side, I answered deliberately, letting my words land with weight, is a concern for the marketing team. They're the ones who will spin our profits into feel-good photos of smiling kids in the annual reports. Mr. Hayes nodded in agreement, his eyes gleaming with the pride of a mentor watching his star pupil. Precisely, Isabel. We calculate interest here, not tears. The new analyst shrank in her chair, having just received her first real lesson in the temple of high finance. After the meeting, Teresa Alvarez, my fiercest rival since I'd snatched the director promotion right out from under her, sidled up to me, her fake smile barely concealing her claws. Isabel, darling, I heard you're personally handling the foreclosure on that old couple out in Maplewood. Isn't that a bit below your pay grade? Her feigned concern was as transparent as the glass walls of our office. Some cases just require a personal touch, I replied, offering no further explanation. The truth was, something about that address had snagged my curiosity. A coincidence my logical mind dismissed, but my gut couldn't ignore. It was the same address from my childhood bracelet. Just a fluke, I told myself, completely unaware that fate rarely deals in flukes. Have you ever felt like you were being pulled toward something that was about to shatter everything you believed about yourself? We've got a pool going for this quarter, announced Rick, the CFO, as he swirled expensive scotch in a crystal glass during the unofficial executive happy hour. It was Thursday, the day the top brass gathered at the rooftop bar to celebrate the week's financial carnage. Whoever closes the most foreclosure cases gets an all-expenses-paid weekend at a resort in the Hamptons. Hearty laughter filled the air as I watched the ice melt in my glass, just like my humanity had melted away over the years. Isabel's quiet tonight, Paul provoked, a guy who's been envious of my position from day one. What's the matter? Finally grow a conscience? Mr. Hayes placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was meant to seem paternal, but was loaded with his usual ulterior motives. Our Isabel is just focusing on the big one tomorrow, aren't you? His fingers squeezed slightly, a silent reminder that he expected results. A special case, he continued for the others. An elderly couple who have exhausted every possible appeal. But the rules are the rules. What he didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that I had spent the previous night obsessively researching that address, that couple, trying to figure out why my normally silent heart was hammering every time I thought about this specific foreclosure. "A toast to our foreclosure champion," shouted Teresa, raising her champagne flute with false enthusiasm. The others joined in, and I forced a smile that never reached my eyes. "May tomorrow be just another successful day for the bank," she added, her eyes locked on mine, as if she could sense my hesitation. I took a long sip, the liquid burning my throat, just as doubt was burning away my certainties. For the first time in years, I wondered, what if, just this once, I didn't follow protocol? What if I let that sliver of humanity I fought so hard to bury come to the surface? But I quickly shoved the thought away. Weakness was not an option for someone who grew up in the system and swore she'd never be vulnerable again. Tomorrow would be just another day, another house, another family. Or would it? Have you ever had that feeling you were standing on the edge of a pit you'd dug yourself? The town car stopped in front of 237 Acacia Drive, in a part of Maplewood that had clearly seen better days. It was a neighborhood of older homes mixed with newer, nondescript apartment buildings. I dismissed the driver, "Be back in an hour," and spent a few moments just looking at the simple house. Faded blue siding, a neglected garden, lace curtains in the windows. It was so different from the mansions I usually dealt with, yet for some reason this particular house made my stomach churn. Taking a deep breath, I straightened my perfect suit, my armor against emotion, and walked through the small iron gate, which creaked as if protesting my intrusion. That's when I saw it, a wooden swing hanging from a thick branch of an old oak tree in the yard. It was rusty and abandoned, swaying gently in the September breeze. An image flashed in my mind, so vivid it stopped me in my tracks. A little girl in a yellow dress, laughing as someone pushed her higher and higher. "Higher, Daddy, higher!" I shook my head, disoriented. Where did that come from? I never had a father to push me on a swing, never had a yard with an oak tree. Never. Or had I? Why did the smell of freshly cut grass seem so achingly familiar? Why were my eyes welling up over a simple, worn-out swing? "Be professional," I muttered to myself, forcing my feet to move toward the front door. The chime of the doorbell echoed inside the house like a warning siren. Slow footsteps approached, and the door opened to reveal a woman in her late 60s, her gray hair in a simple bun, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of exhaustion. Yet her face still held traces of a quiet beauty. Her eyes, the same shade of brown as mine, studied me for a second before widening in absolute shock. Something in her gaze completely unmoored me. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice trembling. She leaned against the doorframe as if needing it for support. "I'm Isabel Diaz, from the bank," I announced, my voice sounding robotic and strange, as if the words belonged to someone else. The woman turned pale. "Isabel," she repeated in a whisper. Then, turning back into the house, she cried out with an urgency that terrified me. Jose, get in here now." What was it about that desperate call that made my heart pound as if it recognized a long-forgotten danger? Man, when the old guy appeared at the door, I nearly collapsed. He was leaning on a cane, his back stooped with age, but his eyes, I swear to God, they were a male version of my own. A coffee cup slipped from his hand and shattered into 1,000 pieces on the floor. "Oh my God, it's her, Carmen! Our Izzy is back!" I was frozen, paralyzed, as if a bucket of ice water had been dumped over my head. Izzy? No one ever called me that. No one except who? A memory tried to surface, but slipped through my mental grasp like wet soap. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else," I managed to say, trying to reclaim my professional tone, but my voice came out weak, barely a whisper. "I'm a representative from the bank. I'm here about the foreclosure proceedings on this property." I pulled the documents from my briefcase, but my hands were shaking so badly that a few pages fluttered to the ground. What the hell was happening to me? Me, the iron-fisted executive who had evicted entire families without batting an eye, now struggling to hold a few pieces of paper in front of an elderly couple? The woman, Carmen, couldn't take her eyes off me, as if she were looking at a ghost. "Jose, just look at her. It's our little girl," she insisted, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. The old man fumbled for the glasses in his pocket and put them on, examining me from head to toe. The same nose, the exact same eyes, even the way she raises her eyebrow when she's thinking. Something deep inside of me began to fracture, a wall I never even knew I had built. I glanced around the room, desperate for an anchor, and that's when my eyes landed on a framed photograph on the wall. It was a little girl, about 5 years old, wearing a yellow dress and smiling on a wooden swing. The very same girl from my vision in the yard. And the most terrifying part? That little girl was the spitting image of the one childhood photo I had of myself from the foster home. Have you ever had a moment where you felt your entire reality crumble? "Please, come in," I heard myself say, completely forgetting that this was their home, not mine. My mind was in such a spin cycle that I didn't even know what I was saying anymore. We sat in the simple yet immaculately clean living room. The furniture was old but well cared for, and the walls were a gallery of family photos. The two of them just stared at me as if I were the most precious thing in the universe. "Can someone please explain what's going on?" I asked, as my brain struggled to reconcile the fact that I, the woman sent to take their house, was being treated like a prodigal daughter. "You are our daughter, Isabel," the woman, Carmen, said, taking my hands in hers. They were aged and worn by time, but their warmth felt strangely familiar. "You vanished from our backyard when you were 5 years old. We looked everywhere. We filed police reports. We hired private investigators. We went on television news programs." She gestured to a wall covered in yellowed newspaper clippings. "Girl disappears from family's yard. Desperate parents search for daughter. 1 year later." A knot formed in my stomach. "But Mrs. Gable told me you abandoned me at the home. She said you screamed, 'Don't ever come back.'" That's when Jose, my father, rose with difficulty, leaning heavily on his cane. "That woman destroyed our lives," he said, his voice thick with a mixture of rage and grief. "We found out years later that she was part of a ring that trafficked children. By the time the police finally caught her, she had already ruined dozens of families." He pointed to a more recent article. "Former orphanage director arrested in child trafficking scheme." The photo was of Mrs. Gable, the woman I had been taught to believe was my savior. She sold some of the children into illegal adoptions overseas. The others, like you, she kept at her home to collect government funds for each orphan. The more kids she had, the more money she made. I sank heavily into the sofa, my mind reeling. My whole life was a lie. I wasn't an orphan. I wasn't abandoned. I was stolen. "But why did you never find me?" I asked, the tears I had suppressed for 2 decades finally blurring my vision. Carmen sat beside me, touching my face as if I were a delicate treasure. "She changed your last name on the records, forged everything, and when the police finally called us in years later, they showed us—" God, this is so hard to say. Jose finished the sentence for her. "They showed us a death certificate. They told us you had died in a car accident with your supposed adoptive family. They had photos of a body. It looked like you. We were so broken." He began to weep, the kind of deep, ragged sobs of a man who has carried a lifetime of pain. "But we never fully believed it. That's why we never moved. It's why we never threw away your things. We always held out hope that somehow you would find your way back to us." Carmen opened a wooden box that was sitting on the coffee table. Inside, a small yellow dress was neatly folded. "This is the dress you were wearing the day you were taken. I've washed it and kept it safe, just hoping that one day—" She couldn't finish the sentence. I reached out and took the dress, and a shiver of recognition ran through my entire body. "There's one more thing," she continued, pulling a small plastic baggie from the box. From inside it, she carefully removed a hospital bracelet, identical to the one I carried in my purse. "Your father had this made when you were born. He engraved our address on it, just in case. You were wearing it the day you disappeared. We sold everything we had," Jose explained, opening a scrapbook filled with documents and clippings. "The car, our furniture, we even pawned my wedding ring. It all went to paying investigators, lawyers, traveling to chase down false leads." The pages were filled with receipts for huge payments, files from PIs, and police reports. I was even arrested, he continued. They suspected that we had hurt you or sold you. I spent a week in jail until we could prove our innocence. Carmen squeezed my hand tighter. I was a public school teacher, and your father was an assembly line worker at the Ford plant in Edison. We had a simple but good life. After you were gone, I lost my job because I couldn't function. Your father had a nervous breakdown and had to go on disability. We lived on odd jobs for years. I looked around the room and saw the evidence of a middle-class life that had been slowly eroded. A sofa that was once fine, but now had worn patches. The curtains were old, but clean. The TV was a small, outdated model. And now the bank is going to take our home, Jose added with a bitter finality. The very last thing we have left. The place where you took your first steps, where we celebrated your birthdays, where we waited for you for 27 years. The irony was so cruel, it felt like a cosmic joke. Me, the daughter they thought they'd lost forever, had returned not for a happy reunion, but to deliver the final blow that would take away their last shred of hope. How could I ever tell them that I was here to evict my own parents? How could I explain that I had become the very kind of person who destroys families, just as ours was destroyed? Look how the world turns. I, who grew up feeling discarded, was now the tool used to discard others. The bank doesn't care about any of that, Jose said with a sigh, gesturing to a stack of threatening letters. We made our payments on time for 23 years, then the medical bills hit. He pulled up his pant leg to reveal a prosthetic limb. I lost my leg in an accident at the factory after I finally went back to work. The insurance didn't cover the whole cost. We had to choose between paying for my medication and paying the mortgage. Carmen added, we tried to refinance, to negotiate, to ask for a forbearance, but all the bank does is send automated letters, and you can never get a real person on the phone who can actually help. In that moment, I recognized the cold, efficient strategy of my own department. I myself had designed the defaulter dehumanization protocol. No personal contact, only automated written communications, zero real opportunity for negotiation. It was all structured so that executors like me would never see faces, only account numbers. The wealthy have advisors, they have lawyers, they know the bank directors personally, Carmen said, her voice laced with a lifetime of resignation. For working people like us, we're just a number on a spreadsheet. When the money runs out, the system just chews you up and spits you out. My mind flashed to Teresa, Rick, and the others back at the bank, toasting with $500 bottles of champagne while placing bets on how many families they could put on the street. I thought of Mr. Hayes and his predatory smile. I hadn't just become one of them. I had become the best of them, the most efficient machine for ripping people from their homes. And it was all because I believed a lie. All because I thought the world had been cruel to me first, so I had the right to be cruel right back. What is the outstanding balance on the loan? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Jose handed me the latest notice from the bank, $57,000. It was less than 3 months of my salary, a rounding error for someone with a $3 million penthouse in Tribeca. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. It was Teresa, then Hayes, then a senior VP from the board. I silenced it. I couldn't think. Outside, the driver of the town car was probably getting impatient. Do you have anything that proves I'm your daughter? I asked, my own words sounding insane to me. Jose limped over to an old wooden cabinet and returned with a small box. Inside was a child's hairbrush, with a few strands of dark hair still tangled in the bristles. We kept this, just in case the police ever needed it for DNA. Carmen opened a drawer and pulled out my original birth certificate. Isabel Mendonça, I read aloud. Mendonça, not Diaz. I pulled out my driver's license. Isabel Diaz. A fabricated name, an entire identity built on a foundation of lies. Do you have a picture of us together? Anything to prove we were a family? Jose retrieved a photo album. On the first few pages, there I was, a newborn in my mother's arms at the hospital, taking my first steps while holding onto the sofa in this very living room, blowing out candles on my 3rd birthday cake, sitting on my father's shoulders at the Bronx Zoo. And then, the last one, me on the swing, in the yellow dress, smiling, the day before I was taken. As I stared at those photos, something unlocked. It wasn't a conscious thought. It was a flood of sensations. The taste of the chocolate cake Carmen used to bake, the stories Jose would tell before I went to sleep, the feeling of flying on that swing, the sound of the song that was always playing on the kitchen radio while Carmen made dinner. I remember, I whispered in disbelief. I remember the neighbor's dog. He used to scare me. I remember the white picket fence. I remember... I stopped as a darker memory pushed its way to the surface. A woman offering me ice cream by the gate, telling me my mommy said it was okay, leading me away by the hand as I happily licked the cone, too innocent to understand what was happening. Mrs. Gable, the woman who had destroyed all of our lives. My head was a chaotic storm. On one side of the scale was a 20-year career built on the absolute conviction that I was abandoned and that the world owed me something. On the other side were my biological parents, about to lose the last thing they had in the world. And the cruelest twist? It was happening at my own hands. The phone rang again. I'd turned it back on just to check the time. It was Hayes for the 10th time. I answered. Isabel, what the hell is going on? This foreclosure should have taken 30 minutes, and you've been there for 2 hours. The driver says you told him to wait. I'm in negotiations, I said vaguely. Negotiating? Since when do we negotiate foreclosures? He snapped, his voice rising in pitch. This seizure is a priority for the board. Rick has a lot of money riding on you being as swift and efficient as ever. I felt a wave of nausea. A bet. They were betting on my family's suffering. I'll handle this my way, I said, and hung up on him, something I would have never dared to do before. Trouble at work? Jose asked, watching me with those eyes so much like my own. Something like that, I replied, trying to buy time to think. Could I just pay their debt? Wire the money right now? But that would be a clear admission of my connection to them, and the bank would immediately see it as a massive conflict of interest. I'd be fired, investigated, maybe even prosecuted for fraud. Everything I had built would collapse like a house of cards. But on the other hand, how could I possibly proceed with the eviction now that I knew the truth? How could I ever look at myself in the mirror again after making my own parents homeless? The doorbell rang, making me jump. When Jose opened the door, Teresa Alvarez was standing there in her perfect designer suit, wearing her trademark smirk. Isabel, darling. Mr. Hayes was getting worried, so he asked me to come and offer some assistance. Can we chat outside for a moment? Before I could refuse, she had already pulled me by the arm into the front yard. What is this circus? Are you sabotaging this foreclosure? The board is waiting for the confirmation, and you're in there having coffee with the debtors? The situation is more complicated than it appears, I tried to explain. But how could I tell the truth without sounding completely insane? I'm reviewing the file to see if there's a legal basis for renegotiation. Teresa laughed in my face. Since when do you care about legal bases? You're the ice queen, remember? The woman who finalized a foreclosure on Christmas Eve last year? She pulled a set of documents from her own briefcase. I brought a copy. If you can't do the job, I will. I snatched the papers from her hand. I'll handle it, Teresa. Go back to the bank and tell them I'm conducting the process my way. She narrowed her eyes, suspicious. What is going on with you? First, you turned down Hayes's invitation. Now this. Something isn't right. Did these old people offer you a bribe? Because that would be highly unethical and illegal, you know. The irony of her lecturing me on ethics almost made me laugh. Just give me more time, I pleaded, trying to sound in control. 2 hours, and don't come back before then. She left, clearly annoyed, but not before delivering a final warning. Hayes told me to tell you that if you don't close this out today, he'll be here tomorrow morning with the county sheriff. He also said to remind you that your probationary period for the directorship doesn't end until next month. It would be a shame to throw away such a promising career over a pair of old people, wouldn't it? She slid into the black car that was waiting for her, leaving her threat hanging in the air. I had a few short hours to decide the entire course of my life, and theirs. I walked back into the house feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. Carmen had made coffee, the rich, comforting kind that smelled like home. The aroma instantly transported me back to the childhood I had spent so long trying to remember. Here, drink this, mija. You look exhausted. Mija, my daughter. That one simple word, mija, sounded both foreign and wonderful at the same time. Are you absolutely sure that I'm your Isabel? What if this is all just a wild coincidence? What if I just look like her? Jose shook his head, his expression firm. A father knows his own child. It's more than just your face. It's the way you furrow your brow when you're thinking, exactly like I do. It's the shape of your hands, a perfect match to your mother's. These are the small things a stranger would never see. He took my hand and placed it over a pale scar on his wrist. You see this? I got this trying to fix your swing when you were 4. You cried harder than I did when you saw the blood. Some things you don't forget, not even after 27 years. Carmen then brought over a faded blue jewelry box. And there's this. I think this is the final proof if you still have any doubts. Inside the box was a pair of tiny, star-shaped gold earrings. They were yours, a gift for your 5th birthday, just a week before. You know, I stared at them, and a phantom ache pricked my left earlobe. I lost one of them, I said, the memory materializing out of a deep fog. Playing in the yard. You were so mad at me. Carmen's eyes widened, a mixture of shock and pure joy washing over her face. Yes, you cried and we searched all day, but we never found it. How could you possibly know that if you weren't her? The truth was undeniable, an immovable object. I had found my real family. So now what? Do I tell them the whole truth about who I've become and why I'm really here? Do I risk everything I've built to save them? Or do I follow protocol, serve the papers, and live forever with the knowledge that I foreclosed on my own parents? How can fate be so profoundly cruel and ironic? Of all the people in the world, of all the houses to foreclose on, the bank sent me to this one. Was it a coincidence? A punishment? Or was it, just maybe, a chance to redeem myself, to fix what was broken not only in my life, but in the entire heartless system I had helped perfect? I glanced at my watch. 5 p.m. Teresa would be back in less than an hour. Hayes had already sent 3 threatening texts. The world I had meticulously constructed was crumbling around me, and ironically, that wasn't nearly as terrifying as it should have been. There's something I have to tell you, I said finally, sitting between them on the old sofa. I didn't come here by accident. I'm here because I'm the person the bank sent to take your home. They both stared at me, their faces clouded with confusion. You work for the bank? Jose asked, his brow furrowed in that familiar way, the same way I do when I'm processing something difficult. I don't just work for them. I'm the director of the foreclosure division. I'm the person who decides which homes the bank takes and when. Carmen brought a hand to her mouth as the horrific realization dawned on her. You came here to evict us? Our own daughter? I didn't know, I pleaded, the tears now falling freely, uncontrollably. I swear I had no idea who you were. I was raised to believe I was abandoned, that my parents didn't want me. I grew up with so much anger, so much resentment. I became this cold person who could ruin families without a second thought. My voice broke. I became a monster, just like the woman who stole me from you. Jose gripped my hand tightly, his eyes filled not with judgment, but with an astounding depth of understanding. You didn't know, mija. This was not your fault. I have less than 2 hours to figure out what to do, I explained, showing them the menacing texts on my phone. If I don't go through with this, they'll just send someone else tomorrow. I will absolutely lose my job for conflict of interest. They might even sue me if I try to interfere. Carmen, with the simple wisdom that only mothers possess, asked quietly, "What if you paid our debt? You seem very successful." "I've thought of that," I admitted. "I have the money. I could wire it right now and clear the entire mortgage, but the bank will investigate the source of the funds. They'll find out you're my biological parents. They'll say I committed fraud to protect my family." Jose shook his head, indignant. "This whole world is upside down. Helping your own parents is a crime now? In my day, that was called honoring your father and mother." I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. My savings account held far more than the $57,000 they needed. One click, and I could make this all go away. But in that same click, I would lose everything I'd ever built. My Tribeca penthouse, my directorship, my status. Everything I had mistaken for self-worth for all those years. Then again, what was any of that worth compared to the family I thought I'd lost forever? What held more value? The empire I built on a foundation of lies? Or the chance to rebuild my true story from the ground up? That's it, I said, typing my password into the app. I'm transferring the money right now. To hell with the bank. My fingers trembled as I filled in the details. Just as I was about to hit confirm, my phone rang. It was Hayes. I should probably take this, I muttered. One last act as a responsible director. I put the call on speakerphone. Isabel, the board is assembled and waiting for an update. Please tell me you've resolved the situation. A strange sense of calm washed over me. I have resolved it, Mr. Hayes, I said, my voice clear and steady. But not in the way you were hoping. I am emailing my letter of resignation as we speak. And before you ask, yes, I discovered that the defaulters are my biological parents, from whom I was criminally separated as a child. And yes, I am paying off their debt in full right now. You can feel free to sue me. I have DNA proof. I ended the call, feeling a rush of exhilaration I had never experienced before. It was the feeling of freedom. I confirmed the transfer and showed the screen to my parents. It's done. The house is yours again, free and clear. Carmen was sobbing, and so was Jose. I was professionally ruined, would probably face a lawsuit, and would likely have to sell my apartment to afford a legal defense. And yet, in that moment, I had never felt richer in my entire life. Would it be okay if I came home? At least until I get this whole mess sorted out? Jose stood up with some difficulty, leaning on his cane. He walked to a closed door at the end of the hall. He opened it slowly, revealing a child's bedroom, completely untouched by time. A small bed with a pink comforter, dolls lined up on a shelf, crayon drawings pinned to the walls. Your room. It's exactly as you left it 27 years ago. We were just waiting for you to come back. Carmen came up behind me and put her arms around me. You can stay as long as you want. After all, it's always been your home. 3 months have passed since that insane day I went to foreclose on a mortgage and ended up finding my own life. As expected, the bank filed a lawsuit against me for conflict of interest and breach of contract. I hired a sharp human rights attorney, exactly the kind of lawyer I would have ridiculed in my former life. But then, something surprising happened. When the story of the ruthless Wall Street executive who gave it all up to save the parents she never knew she had leaked to the press, I became a kind of unlikely folk hero. Headline: Wall Street exec finds birth parents during foreclosure, gives up career to save them. The video I recorded telling my side of the story didn't just go viral, it exploded. Testimonies from other families torn apart by Mrs. Gable's child trafficking scheme began to surface. A producer from a major streaming service reached out about turning our story into a documentary series. I was invited to give keynote speeches on corporate ethics. Can you believe the irony? Me, the former poster child for corporate ruthlessness, now talking about the humanization of the financial system. Facing a PR nightmare of epic proportions, the bank quietly dropped the lawsuit. It's amazing how quickly sharks learn to act like dolphins when the cameras are on. Life's funny, isn't it? Jose commented one morning, reading a newspaper where my face was featured in the business section. From the one serving papers to being the lead story in the papers. Carmen, ever the practical one, replied while watering her plants. What's important is that we're a family again. The rest is just noise. And she was right, as mothers usually are. I had lost so much. My title, my penthouse, which I had to sell, my entire luxurious lifestyle. But I had gained something no amount of money could ever buy. My real self. Would you trade all of your success for a chance to fix the one lie that defined your entire life? The most ironic twist of all was that I started getting offers from other banks to consult on creating more humane debt restructuring programs. We want your unique perspective, the emails read. Unique perspective? I had simply stood on both sides of the teller window. I knew the power of the institution and the powerlessness of the individual, the cold logic of the system and the raw desperation of someone about to lose everything. I accepted one of the offers, but with a non-negotiable condition. A significant portion of my time would be dedicated to providing pro bono financial counseling for families facing foreclosure. It's almost like fate had some kind of crazy master plan for you, doesn't it? Remarked Teresa, my old rival, when we ran into each other at a coffee shop. She had been promoted to my old position, but she looked far less satisfied than I would have imagined. You look happy, which is weird, since you have nothing left. I smiled, realizing how little she still understood. I didn't lose everything, Teresa. I just lost the things I thought were important, and in their place, I found what actually is. Maybe you'll get that one day. In the financial literacy workshops I started giving at local high schools, I always used my own story as an example of the two Americas that exist side by side. The America of the boardroom and the America of the break room, the one that serves the eviction notice and the one that receives it. Our society is built on a system that is designed to turn human tragedies into numbers on a spreadsheet, I'd explain. And the only way that changes is when those numbers are given back their faces, their names, and their stories. In the corporate world, they called me a traitor. In the communities I worked with, they called me a hero. The truth? I was neither. I was just someone trying to mend a small corner of a broken system I had helped to build. Last night, after dinner, Carmen makes the best arroz con pollo on the planet, by the way, we were sitting on the front porch, watching the stars come out. Jose was retelling the same childhood stories he always told, the ones that were stolen from us for 27 years, now being rebuilt, piece by piece, memory by memory. You know what's so amazing to me? I said, holding my mother's weathered hand. How chance and coincidence can completely alter a life. Chance? Jose laughed, shaking his head. That wasn't chance, mija. Your mother went to church every single Sunday and lit a candle for St. Jude, the patron saint of lost causes. She promised him that if you were ever returned to us, we would build a shrine in the backyard. Carmen playfully slapped his arm, embarrassed. You don't have to tell her all that, Jose. He ignored her, his eyes twinkling. I have no doubt that some higher power guided you back to this house, and it brought you back at the exact moment we needed you most. I looked up at the star-filled sky, wondering if there really was a grand design or if we were all just pieces in a chaotic cosmic game. Maybe we'll never know, but I know this for sure. Sometimes you have to lose everything you think you want to finally find the one thing you actually need. I, who had spent a lifetime believing I was an unwanted orphan, discovered I had always been a beloved daughter. I, who had built a career on taking people's homes, ended up saving the only home that ever truly mattered, my own. So, I'll ask you all, what would you do if you found out that the entire story you've been telling yourself about who you are was a lie? Would you give up everything you'd built to start over? It's 7 a.m., and I'm sitting on the old wooden swing in the backyard, the same one that first unlocked my memories when I arrived here. My father, it's still strange, but wonderful to say that, has repaired and repainted it a bright, sunny yellow. Just like it was when you were a little girl, he'd said. As I rock gently back and forth, I watch the sunrise over this quiet New Jersey neighborhood, a view so different from the one I had from my Tribeca penthouse. Yesterday, I received a tempting offer. An international NGO wants me to lead a global debt restructuring initiative for vulnerable families. A huge salary, prestige, international travel. It's almost everything I had before, but this time, it comes with a purpose. Jose and Carmen have encouraged me to take it. You could help so many people, they said, always thinking of others before themselves. But it would mean moving, leaving them again. Then we'll come with you, Carmen suggested immediately. We already lost 27 years. We're not losing another day. Life is a funny thing, isn't it? You can spend years building walls around your heart, thinking you're protecting yourself when all you're really doing is building a prison. I destroyed families because I believed my own had been destroyed. I hurt people because I thought I had been hurt. And in the end, I discovered the biggest lie wasn't the one the world told me, but the one I told myself. If you're listening to this and wondering if it's worth tearing down your own walls, I can tell you that it is. It hurts like hell, and you lose things you thought you couldn't live without. But what you gain is priceless. So tell me, what would you do if you discovered your whole life was based on a lie? Would you continue living the comfortable falsehood, or would you risk everything for the painful, beautiful truth?